Talk of the Town here on Tuesday morning, June the 10th. And we've been talking a lot this morning about last night's Greenville City Council meeting. In case you have not heard what happened last night, you might remember back in May, with no prior discussion and not on the agenda, the City Council voted to direct the city manager to include a 1-cent sales tax into her city budget. And that was in May. Well, she came forward last night. There was a public hearing at the Greenville City Council chambers last night about the sales tax and the city budget and the proposed bond referendum and things like that. And now, last night, saying that recent decisions by the North Carolina General Assembly have put more pressure on the budget. The motion was made and ratified again on a 4-2 vote to add another penny to the city property tax, and so now the proposed tax increase is going to be 2 cents per $100 value of property in Greenville. Here to talk about that is the mayor of Greenville, Mayor Alan Thomas, who, by the way, did not vote last night but spoke out against this. Mayor Thomas, how are you today?
Good morning, Henry. Just getting back revitalized this morning, back to work after a nice 5-hour city council meeting last
night. The first vote for the first 1 cent increase in taxes was a total surprise. We talked about that with you before. There was no prior discussion about it. There was no discussion ahead of time, and so that was taken in May. Then last night, the justification is decisions that are put more pressure on the city budget from the North Carolina General Assembly. You know, what's developing here is, on the surface, in appearance anyway, is a propensity for these 4 city council people to pull the trigger really quickly on a tax increase.
Well, Henry, let's be clear. Everyone should take notice. City elections have ramifications, and each district elects a representative. We elect a mayor, we elect a council member at large, and many times we're so busy with our lives and work and things we're doing. You're electing representatives, and you need to understand their policies and where they stand. And we're now seeing some of that come to fruition. This actually is the third tax increase that has been voted on by this council in the past 3 months. We've had 2 property tax increases, which have now been voted on 4-2, with Rose Glover and Candy Smith opposing based on reasons. And we've also had a business privilege license tax, which was voted to increase to go from being capped to unrestricted, which is part of the reason that we were called out by name. Greenville was called out by name in the state Senate several weeks ago as one of the examples of why they wanted to get rid of the privilege license tax. So,
let's stop and talk about that for a second. We've talked about that a considerable amount this morning, but what's happening in municipalities, Raleigh and Charlotte were the big ones because they were out of control in terms of what they were raising taxes on businesses just to exist. What is the business privilege license? It is just a fee that any business has to pay to the city to exist in the city, right?
Well, which I have to pay like everyone else, and it's an element that has been in cities to help offset the disproportionate amount of services, whether it's access for customers or fire rescue. For example, Walmart having 1,100 calls for service in a year versus other stores. It's something that has been in municipalities, not just in North Carolina, but across the country for 60, 70, 80 years. But what has happened and the way it was being applied in North Carolina was very disproportionate. It was really left up to individual cities. It should have been, and I said this when we discussed this several months ago when the council decided to vote 4-2 to uncap it, to increase the fees. I said that this was not being applied proportionally and that I expected the legislature probably to come and take a look at this. Now, being fair, we do need resources to run the city. Unless you want less services, unless you want the roads to crumble, we want less police, less fire, and nobody has a problem with handling their fair share. This needed to be addressed, and I'm still working with the folks in Raleigh, and you were there, Henry, when I spoke to the governor about this. So we're working on trying to find a good solution to offset this next session.
Now, let's also make sure people understand that because Calvin Mercer has put out his blog email today saying that this is a $536,000 cut to Greenville. Let's be clear about that. What he's saying is of the money that they wanted to raise the tax on the Greenville city businesses. He's included that in there because, as I understand it, if allowed to do it before the legislature stopped you from doing it, what was going to happen was that there was going to be an additional $400,000 collected from Greenville city businesses, correct?
Based on the 4-2 vote to uncap the business privilege license, which is really out of the norm. There's only a handful of cities in North Carolina that do that. And let's be fair, staff recommended a small adjustment because there had not been one in many years. But this council decided on a 4-2 vote to go vote uncapped. And he is including that number, which it was repealed by the state legislature with the repeal of the privilege license tax.
So to say then that this decision by the General Assembly cut $536,000 from the current Greenville city budget is absolutely misleading and not true.
Well, it doesn't include all the parameters. It's probably not a fair assessment, but I think you need to always try to characterize things where you let people give people all the information and let them form their own assumptions. But
that's
the
problem when you
spend propaganda. You have to understand that.
When you spend things like Councilman Mercer does, when he spends things like that, again, I said this earlier today. What you've got to do is you've got to dig down and look exactly what the facts are and forget the spin, because you now have a city council that looks like they have other things on their mind. And again, I said this earlier this morning, I'll say it again. People need to watch these Greenville City Council meetings and hear what their plans are. What are their priorities? We've heard a lot of things that don't show up in these budgets yet. That we had a caller this morning, Mayor, that made a good point. When property is revalued, property values are going to be back up in Greenville. We've just come through a very deep recession where property values have been depressed a little bit. Commercial property is coming back. Residential property is certainly coming back. And so the city is going to realize an increase in their revenues just from that coming up.
Well, that is exactly why 2 years ago, look, we faced this same decision, actually a more difficult decision, 2 years ago. The easy thing would have been to pull the lever and follow staff's recommendation and just raise taxes. They recommended a 2 to 4 cent tax increase. Well, we looked around the community, and this is something that Candy Smith has been very strong on. We said, look, you're getting hit with utilities rate increases. We're getting hit with, fuel costs, energy costs, just daily life, food and medicine. We didn't feel that was the right time at that point. So what did we actually cut taxes by $2.3 million 2 years ago? Again, elections have ramifications. That was the thought process of a more business-oriented council a couple of years ago. And you look at when we redirected the funding, look how much growth you've seen in the city in the past 2 years. By setting the table uptown and districts across the city, you've got over $200 million of new investment in this city. And it's not because we raised taxes, it's because we became more efficient. But you're not going to hear that from emails from my council member Mercer. I mean, look, hey, elections have ramifications, and we are where we are right now, and people need to take notice and be involved. And
let's talk about how the money's going to be spent, because what we're hearing is we've cut to the bone. We heard that term again last night. We've cut everything to the bone. We've heard that we're in crisis mode. We've got to plug holes. We've heard all those catchphrases. And then when you evaluate it, you go back. We've built a dream park. We've got a theater project on the board that people are, I think it has to be examined at this point. I know you and I don't agree on all of these things, and I certainly want your opinion on them. But, I've never understood the justification for the intermodal center and the amount of money that the taxpayers are going to have to put into that. But when you hear things like cut to the bone and plug in holes and we're in crisis mode, you have to go back and look and say, okay, how are we really spending the taxpayers' money here? Is that fair?
Well, I think it is. I mean, you can't go on lockdown as a community. You have to set the table and create investment that creates other private investment. But you can't put all the money on the back of the taxpayers, or go out and just increase revenue on the back of the taxpayers. I think that's my concern. We set an efficient budget 2 years ago. There are budget ramifications here, with decisions being made and, Raleigh and the economy is still kind of coming along. But it is not a fair characterization to say things are completely cut to the bone and are in crisis mode. We actually are adding an entire new initiative this year for over $1.4 million, which is a facility maintenance program, which is probably a smart plan. But to say that, resources aren't being now used and that we're cut to the bone is, in my opinion, not worth adding a single penny of tax at all. I proposed last night we could have made several adjustments. We had a surplus in several funds that we could have redirected that could have covered this cost for around $80,000 instead of having to raise a whole nother penny. But again, the vote was 4-2, and I'll continue to make that argument that we need to focus on being more efficient. The past 2 years has been a great example. You've seen the growth around here by the city not getting in the way, but fostering growth, creating jobs here.
Mayor Alan Thomas, the mayor of Greenville, and again, surprise vote last night by the Greenville City Council to raise taxes again. Second month in a row, a vote has been taken to raise taxes. Now, the truth is that the taxes won't go into effect. None of that will go into effect until the entire budget is in and then it's ratified. So there's still time for people to weigh in with their city council people and oppose this and examine more deeply what's going on and what the priorities and things like that. But on Thursday night, people need to understand this too. On Thursday night of this week, you're meeting again, and you're going to be talking about floating a bond referendum, which is going to increase taxes again. And this time it's to do things like repair city streets. I think the other two things that are on the this discussion agenda would be a bond referendum for public safety and a bond referendum for parks and recreation. So, it looked like everybody was on the same page until a month ago moving forward, and that, the idea was to try to increase whatever revenues needed through a bond referendum, put it before the taxpayers and let the taxpayers decide. At this point, Mayor, with this city council meeting 2 months in a row and increasing taxes 2 months in a row, I would have to say that at this point, people are going to take a deep look at that bond referendum, and it's going to be very difficult to convince people to do it.
Well, a couple of months ago, my recommendation after we were looking at, as the budget was starting to shake down, looking into the details, my recommendation was no tax increase and look at targeted areas. Just be more efficient in what we were doing. Look at the targeted areas where we needed to catch up. There is no argument in terms of our roads and infrastructure. If we're going to have a strong economy here, we have to have a strong foundation. Our roads is something that for decades we have neglected in the city. As a result, we have 700 miles of roads, close to 100 miles in the city are near failure. It takes about $80,000 to $100,000 to get roads up to par. If roads get to failure, it's an X10. It costs $1 million a mile to fix a road. So that's just common sense. Now, other council members started piling on with the concepts of building new parks, some other new facilities. And my discussion on that and my response was, well, everyone likes to cut ribbons, but there's no one there when you have to handle the sustainability costs year in and year out. And as a city, that's something that we have to be measured in an economy where we're still coming out of, the back end of some economic challenges, Henry. I think this does severely limit the possibility of any of these bonds at this point. And I think it's an example of not having the full perspective and looking how this all impacts each other when votes are being made. We've got a couple of new city council members, and we have some that have been here for a number of years. And again, Henry, the vote's 4-2. I still am adamant that we need to take care of our roads and infrastructure, or we're going to take care of them at 10 times the cost. The other elements, we're putting an advisory group together, and I guess they're going to still follow through with that. But, I'm very I'm very concerned in terms of where we go with that at this point. But I'll tell you this: we had last night was the public hearing on the budget, and guess how many people showed up to speak at our public hearing on the budget? Not a single soul showed up.
You know what though? What bothers me about that is that they did what was required to advertise that by running an ad in the Daily Reflector to say there's a public hearing, but people don't know about that. It was too early for the public hearing, in my opinion. It especially is too early for the public hearing when when your city council is not telling you up front that they're planning on continuing to raise your taxes. I mean, if people had known that taxes were going to be increased 2 cents, and there had been time to get that word out to people through my show, through newspaper ads, through websites, through social media, stuff like that, I don't think you'd have had. I don't think it was an indication that nobody cares that their taxes are being increased, Mayor. I think it was an indication that nobody knew what was going on. I think people are just now getting in touch with what is getting ready to happen with the Greenville City taxes.
Well, I would encourage people to get engaged. I saw something that a great moment in democracy, in my opinion. I watched the county commissioners meeting last week. I saw an overflowing crowd. I saw citizens get up, stand up, speak their mind. I love to get emails and phone calls from folks, but if they aren't willing, as a tax-paying citizen in this city, to show up at a council meeting and give their thoughts and provide their insight as just a family person, as a business person, just as a citizen of the city, well, then they put me in a difficult position. I am one voice on this council as mayor. I'm a loud voice, and I'll speak my mind, but we have to have the citizens have to show up and stand up. There will be public comment Thursday, and people need to be there and get engaged. There will not be a public hearing on the budget, but there is public comment. So
Thursday night is another chance for people to come to the city council meeting and speak.
Yes, they can come and speak in the public comment.
Your point about what just happened with the county commissioners, of course, the council chambers, the commissioner chambers were packed last week with people that were upset about a $20,000 expenditure.
Right.
This is a $1.2 million increase in your taxes.
Yep.
So, you make a very good point, Mayor. But again, that had been a very well publicized situation, and this has not been. This has been flying under the radar for the most part. We
need public input. I think it's very important, and we do have many people that are engaged. But we're setting the tone for this city for the next 2 years. Last cycle in 2011, our tone was we were going to actually cut taxes. We were going to be more efficient as a city, and the results can be seen around Greenville. And that did not make a couple of those council members happy. They went out and worked hard. They got 2 more folks elected, and now elections have ramifications, and we have a different philosophy. But when it comes down to it, you have to get engaged and get involved. This really needs to be citizen-driven in terms of where we're going with this thing.
It also strikes me, I feel the need to say this, and there's some good people on the city council. I can disagree with them philosophically and politically. But Rick Croskery's been an old friend of mine for a long time. He's a local physician. He's a good guy. I worked with him on the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. I was the chairman of the chamber when he was coming along. He was chairman of the chamber after me, and I had a chance to work with Rick. But it does strike me that this city council wants to put the burden on businesses in Greenville. And that's what this is about. This is why they're saying, well, we were going to put the burden on the businesses, but the General Assembly won't let us. So now we're going to have to put it on the taxpayers. Well, and it does strike me. Let me just make one more point, Mayor, then I'm done. It does strike me that not one single person in that 4 voting block is involved in a business in Greenville.
Well, I will say this. I think in every person that runs for office and everyone that's in office, there are great qualities about all of them, but that doesn't necessarily mean philosophically we agree. We all come with different backgrounds, Henry, and we bring that background every day when we step up there to make a vote or make a decision and think through a process. Now, we are in a situation now budget-wise where a decision's been made, and it's going to be difficult for them to be able to back away from making that decision. But I stand fast with this. You can see the progress around the city. It did not require a tax increase to create this progress. We could have done this simply by running an efficient budget, but the decision was made in a different direction.
All right, Mayor Allen Thomas, we'll continue to follow this. Thursday night's city council meeting should be quite interesting. And again, I join you and Mayor in encouraging people to contact their city councilman and show up for Thursday night's meeting. I think that's a great idea. They need to know how people feel about this. Thank you,
we
sir.
appreciate your engagement in what you do for the community, and I think it's important for everyone to be made aware. And as you said, this only gets done when citizens get involved, and we appreciate your input. Thank you.
All right.